Now then, my friends, I've spoken to you many a time about electric cars and EVs, electric vehicles, whatever you want to call them. Like this one here, the Porsche Taycan. One thing though that nobody on the internet, not that I've seen anyway, is speaking of is, well, learning to drive and driving schools. And it's interesting because I've had a driving school contact me just recently and told me a little bit of inside information about electric cars and the future of driving schools. So stay tuned, my friends, and if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, click that little bell for notifications of when I upload new videos. Now, without further ado, my friends, let's go. Now then, my friends, okay, so I've made many videos about EVs, electric cars, electric vehicles, whatever you want to call them, and my dislike of them, even though I own one, and I have done for 2 years. And if you're a regular of the channel, you'll know that to get rid of this car now would cost me an arm and a leg, basically, because I'm locked into it, because the price and the value of the car has gone down that much, and what I owe back on the car is a lot more. So we won't get into that because that's not what this video is about. Anyway, I've done videos on that before. We digress. I've also done videos on the fact that I think it's all about control. The only reason that the government want to get us in these cars is to stop freedom of movement. This is all my opinion, by the way, just in my opinion, and I could be wrong. I have to say that. You have to cover yourself these days, don't you? And I believe that the government are telling us to get in these electric cars, and they're driving their gas guzzling V8s or whatever they are, and their Range Rovers, and but letting us minions drive around in these battery operated milk floats. And I've come to thinking, you know what about people learning to drive? What about driving schools? Because cast your mind back to when you were learning to drive. It was probably a bit different for me, because my dad taught me how to drive. He was a police officer and a police patrol car driver, and he taught me very well. However, that saves me some money, but these days it can cost an arm and a leg. And I was giving this some thought when a driving school, and now the driving school doesn't want to be named for obvious reasons, because things get a little bit heated these days, don't they? But this gentleman called me, we'll call him Dave for want of a different name. So Dave, the driving instructor, called me, and he said, oh, I've seen your videos online. He said, have you ever thought about what's going to happen to driving schools in the future, etc.? And I got having a chat with him, and I said, well, I'm guessing it's going to be more expensive because of the time down for charging, etc. And he was like, well, yeah, not only that, he told me post-pandemic, the driving schools anyway, it's cost more to drive post-pandemic, and the reason being is because in lockdown a lot of the driving schools had cars, and they had them on lease, and they couldn't afford to pay them, so they sent them back. And then when they came back to buy cars back again, when the lockdown and the pandemic was over, they couldn't afford to buy cars because the price had increased, etc. So there now are less driving schools than there was before. So this is all inside information, by the way, from this driving school. So thank you very much, Dave. So there we go. So driving schools now it costs more money to learn to drive. You give a driving school a ring and find out how much it is. You'll be shocked how much it is to learn to drive these days. Now, we went into talking about cars, etc., and he doesn't own an electric car. He knows people that do own electric cars. His car, he says, I've never paid any more than £10,000 for a car, and it's normally a diesel one that he goes for. He said, however, this time he's paid £16,000 for a car, but if you've got a driving school, excuse me, you're going to be looking at round about, well, I'd say 40 to 50,000 pounds to purchase a car, an electric car for a driving school. Now, not only that, you've also got your downtime, because Dave said to me, he said, well, I can get, say, 10 hours out of a day and be teaching somebody to drive for 10 hours a day. You work that out. If you've got an electric car, then you're probably going to be looking at, I don't know, 6 hours a day. So you're losing 4 hours where you're actually charging, and also then drinking lots of coffee, etc. So you're going to lose that. So they're going to have to increase their prices to cover for the time lost and the lessons lost by having an electric car, by that wasted time. So that's one issue. Then it also involves other issues as well, which we'll get to in a minute. Just gonna have a little drink and I'll get around. It was a really interesting conversation with him, to be honest, and I really enjoyed it, and I learned lots of information. Nobody's actually thought of this. What about the person who's learning to drive? Well, I reckon, well, I'll tell you what, I'll have a little drink, and you talk amongst yourselves, go and put the kettle on or whatever, and we'll come back and we'll go through it. So I'll keep my hands at the 10 to 2 position there, you know, especially I've probably got Dave watching me as well. Don't criticise my driving. Now then, we were also talking about the fact that young people at the moment, the younger generation who are trying to learn to drive, we're pricing them out already because, you know, the cost of living is going up. We're pricing them out of houses and buying their own houses. They can't afford to get their own mortgages, and soon they're not going to be able to get their own cars or even learn to drive because of the cost of learning to drive, which is, it's crazy and it's all wrong. And again, it is to restrict freedom of movement, in my opinion. That is, I mean, when I learned to drive, it was, I cast your mind back learning to drive, it gave you your freedom. It literally, you've grown up throughout your childhood and your early teenage years, and then you get to 17 and you can't wait to drive and get the keys to a car, and it gives you complete freedom. It's like being a bird and getting your wings. It's amazing, and we're taking that away from the younger generation, and it's not right, is it, at all, by pricing them out of driving. Now, let me get down to the skill of driving, which is what I went through with Dave. And we said, at the moment, I learned to drive, although this is an electric car, I learned to drive in a car with a gearbox, or a stick shift if you're watching in the United States. And if you drive and you learn to drive in a stick shift, a manual gearbox, then you can go and drive in an electric car, an automatic car, whatever you want. However, if you drive and you pass your test in an automatic, then you cannot drive a manual car. You don't have a license to drive a manual car. So we're going to take that skill away, the skill of driving away from the younger generation, because, keep my hands on the wheel, because if you start driving in an electric car, there's obviously no gearbox. There's not really any skill to it. The only skill is obviously road sense, which you've got to learn, etc., and road signs. But you're taking away the skill of the actual control of the car, and I believe you lose control of the car by not having a gearbox. Even when I had my Porsche Boxster, which was like an automatic, but you had paddle shift on there, it gave you more control by changing down throughout the gears, and you got more control over the car. So the skill set for driving cars is going to be lost in the next generation if we go all electric, which is going to be a shame, really, isn't it? So not only are we pricing out the younger generation for learning to drive, keep my hands on the wheel, for learning to drive, we're also taking away their skill set and the skill of driving a manual car. And also, let me say, take my hand off the wheel for a minute, and also let me say, now because I passed my test in a manual car, if I want to go and drive, and don't quote me on this, but I can drive a certain set of lorries, certain weights of lorries, etc., up to a certain weight, vans and lorries, etc. Now, you're not going to be able to do that, are you? Because you imagine a younger generation takes their test in an electric car with no gearbox. You go into a lorry or whatever, or a van that you want to drive, a smaller lorry or a van. Well, you're not going to be able to do that because they're going to be geared. So what does that mean? You're going to have to take your test again in a car with gears? It doesn't make any sense. We're taking away the whole skill of driving, and it's a shame. Anyway, come on, onwards. So, think about it. The powers that be want to restrict movement. They want control over you. So how do they do that? Hands on the wheel, 10 to 2 position. So how do they do that? Well, you cut it off at the root, because if you can stop people driving, that means there's even less people on the roads. Price the younger generation out of driving. They have no intention of anybody, in my opinion, I say in my opinion, they have no intention of anybody driving anywhere or going anywhere. Only the elite will be able to drive anywhere and go anywhere, and that is what my belief is in this whole situation, as I say, in my opinion. And it's totally wrong, because you're taking away freedom for the younger generation. I mean, a lot of the younger generation, when they pass the test, cast your mind to passing your test, and the first car that you had, you were really proud of it, and it probably cost you, you probably went out and bought a little jalopy or whatever. Well, you're not going to be able to do that with an electric car, because the problem with it is they're more expensive to start with, and if you go and get a used electric car, then the batteries are going to be depleted and going to be no good anyway, and you're going to end up with a massive bill to replace the battery packs in them. So yet again, we're restricting movement. Where is all this going? I mean, I'd like to know. If you're a driving school and a driving instructor, let me know in the comment section down below. If you're one of your children or grandchildren at the moment are learning to drive, let me know in the comment section how much they're paying. And have you asked about learning to drive in an electric car? Because I asked Dave, the driving instructor, I said, how many people have rang your office up? He's a very, very well-known driving school. I won't say which area either, but it's a very well-known and very well-respected driving school. So how many people have actually rang you up and asked whether you can teach them in an electric car? And the answer to that was two people. And one of them, when they said, no, we don't have an electric car or any electric cars, they said, good, because I don't want to learn an electric car. So there you go. Where is it all going? Nobody's actually thought of this. Learning to drive, driving schools, electric cars. So I asked Dave to sum it up and tell me what he thinks is the future of driving schools and learning to drive. And he said to me, well, I can tell you this, there'll always be driving schools, there'll always be people learning to drive. However, there will be a lot less. Now, there's a lot less since post-pandemic, and that's meant higher prices. However, there's going to be even less, and obviously, as we know, hands on the wheel, both hands on the wheel, as we know, less competition means higher prices, which is going to price out the normal person on the street. The young 17-year-old that just wants to learn to drive and get himself a little jalopy, that's going to be a thing of the past. It's only going to be the elite, in my opinion, that is going to be able to learn to drive, which is a shame, really, and that's where we are at. So unfortunately, nobody's actually thought of this. If you're a driving school, let me know what you think. It was a very interesting conversation that I had with Dave, for another name, and I thought to myself, it's a bit sad, because the memories that I had, I'll get rid of that, the memories that I had from being a child and learning to drive, it was exciting, it was freedom, it gave you your freedom. My mum always used to say to me, having a car is your freedom. Without your car, you have no freedom. And that is where we're at. Think about that. Isn't it time that we woke up to this absolute madness of electric cars and EVs that we're being pushed into by the powers that be that don't drive them themselves? Think about that. They don't drive them themselves. There's a certain mayor that's putting in the ULEZ zones and ultra low emission zones and saying that we should drive electric cars that doesn't drive them himself. Now, is that not a little bit hypocritical? It's absolutely outrageous, and it is time that we woke up to this fact before it is too late. I can tell you that. Now, you will say that, well, he's doing that because, you know, it's dangerous, and we don't want our children and the younger generation to breathe in these dangerous fumes. However, that's okay, but then is he also saying, well, if you pay the ultra low emission zone charge, then it's fine, doesn't really matter? Think about that. It's not about that. It's time we woke up and said no to electric cars, because we don't want to lose our freedom, do we? Anyway, that's my rant over, and I hope you enjoyed the information that I got from Dave, the driving school. If you own a driving school, let me know in the comment section down below what your thoughts are. Maybe you're learning to drive, maybe one of your children or grandchildren are learning to drive. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But remember, wake up before it's too late. I'll see you guys in the next one. And do me a favour, share this video on social media so that we can try and wake other people up to the fact that electric cars are not the answer. That's all from me today. Thanks a lot. See you in the next one. Both hands on the wheel. Both hands on the wheel. I could do with a refresher course, couldn't I?